Hi, this is a summary of the workshop that I hope to conduct in person on Google Fusion Tables, and please bear with me here as I'm about to lose my voice. I'm hoping I can record the whole thing prior to losing my voice. The summary that we're going to do in this video is on Google Fusion Tables, and this video could stand as a standalone component, but I think having this video plus the in-person workshop is going to be the better of the two options, because it will allow you to ask questions and get more information. So before we start out, there's 6 learning objectives that I want you to take away from this. At the end of this video, you will be able to understand what a fusion table is and how it differs from a spreadsheet. You could identify possible uses for a fusion table. You will know how to import a data set, how to locate public data sets, understand what data integrity is and why it is important, and you also will create a map with data and the geocode in the location, and we will take the final step of creating a chart for the first time using the data set. So first off, Fusion Tables is a product from Google that allows for the visualization of data sets. Fusion tables can utilize multiple data sets. A fusion table differs from a spreadsheet in terms of the visualization. Sure, you could create a graph in Excel, but you can't create a map using the data that's in there. So the way I like to see it is a fusion table is like a spreadsheet in Excel or Google Sheets on steroids, for a better sense of the term. So how did we use fusion tables, or how do we use fusion tables? At my previous job, we used fusion tables as a way to visualize where our enrollment was located. We had students who enrolled in our school that was within a 50-mile radius, but we didn't know, were we getting students from one location primarily over another? Were they coming from the same street or the same, geographic area? So once we mapped all of our students' addresses using Google Fusion Table, it was a table that wasn't shared with anybody. We had no other identifying information attached to the students. We just had addresses. Um, we saw that we had a lot of students coming from one section of the town, and what we did with that data then was we compiled public transit options for them, so that when they came in or when they needed a way to get into our building, if they couldn't get a ride or whatever, because we were a charter school, we didn't have transportation because we were an online school. Um, we could provide them with more accurate and timely information and say, oh, here's the bus schedule for the bus that's only a few blocks from your house. So that's one way that we started to explore using Google Fusion tables in the broader sense of helping our students. The way I'm going to show it to you today is to generate some questions and discussions about the roller coaster industry. So let's go on. Before you can start using fusion tables, you first need a data set. You can't do anything without the data set. Once you have the data set, you're good to go. You can start playing around. So there's 3 ways to get data into a fusion table. You can do the direct entry method, which if you go to edit, you can go to add a row or add a column. And then, excuse me. So, if we wanted to add a new row to this existing data set, we just click on add row and we put in all our information. Another way is to have a CSV file. The CSV stands for comma separated value file, which means that when the file is exported out, the comma is the delimiter, which tells the program importing it that when you look for the comma, that means that there's a new field. So if you have an existing data set and you wanted to play around with it, you could export it out from your spreadsheet software as a CSV file. It is a file type that when you go to File, Save As, you select the file type as CSV. In Google, if you go to File, Export, you do it that way. The third way, which is pretty cool in my opinion, is the public data set. Um, and the public data set we'll talk more about here, but I also want to take the time here um, to remind you that if you're using a self-created data set, either via direct entry or through a CSV file, you want to know your file layout prior to adding data, and you want to ensure that you have a primary key, which is a unique value, and that you've established data integrity. We'll explain more about those later. Don't worry about those for right now. So the public data sets can be found if you go to Help and then select Search Public Tables. So one thing you want to think of is some search terms on what you would like to compare. Um, Public data sets are good for when you know something already exists out there and you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So let's look at Ohio. Let me try that again here. Ohio weather. And it's searching. So what we're hoping to establish here through Ohio weather is, we could have weather for Fairfield County, Weather USA. All these are different data points that we have, and you can kind of see an example of what the data is going to look like before you bring it in by clicking on this area where it says Show More. So you can see that this is looking at the weather radios for NOAA. I'm originally from Allen County, so it has same number of 09 or 039003. The transmitter's in Lima. It's broadcasting on this frequency, and its call sign is WXJ93. All that is data that you could bring in. I mentioned weather because, quite frankly, the Ohio winter this year has been less than desirable. If you find a data set that you would like, if you click Import Data, it brings that data directly into Google Fusion Tables. For what we're doing today, we're going to use a pre-existing data set that I created based on some information that we'll explain later. So data integrity. Let's talk about data integrity before we go further. Well, when working with data sets, you want to make sure that your data has integrity, meaning that it is valid data and it is accurate. When you are creating a column, it is best to determine what that column will be used for prior to placing data in the column. So if the column is, for example, last name, then this column would be defined as a text column. This means that the expected input for that column is text. If you're doing a birth date column, then you would want to make sure that you set it as a date column and then set the format that you will accept for a date. Will that be year, 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 year? So let's say, would that be 2012 slash month of July slash day of 01? Or can you enter it in as 7/1/12 and it will know that it's July 7th or July 1st, 2012. Um, when you define your column type, you're also allowing for the program to know what you might want to do with that column. Um, a text column you typically won't do math computations with. It is possible in some areas, but we're not going to get into that because it's not valid for this. But with a numeric column, a number column, you would do math computations, or you could. Um, this is also known as data validation because you could have it force a check of the data to make sure that you're not misentering information or putting in a, a numeric column into a text column, basically. We'll explore this briefly in the next section, though. I do have a favorite saying that when it comes to data, bad data in, bad data out, or good data in, good data out. This simply means that the data you output is only going to be as good and valid as the data that was the input. So if you're trying to sum a field that is supposed to be numeric and you have a mix of numeric and text values, the computation is going to fail because it's going to be like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this because it's not my expected data type. If possible, it's always best to put restraints on a column so that it can only accept a predetermined data type. This will save you time down the road, and it also keeps you from going insane when you're trying to figure out what went wrong down the road. Trust me, I know from experience. It is also best practice to have a field that is defined as the key. The key is a field that creates and identifies a unique record. Um, this is kind of getting more into database management, database creation, but it's also typically a field that is common in other aspects of the database. So, as an example, you have two tables that you're working with called students and courses. A common field amongst both tables is student ID. We know that a student ID is a unique value to each student, so this could be the key value if you're only having one course. So let's just say that you wanted to see all of the kids enrolled in an advisory class out of the courses table. That you would be able to generate a unique value on. So in more complex data operations, this would allow you to write a statement that joins these tables together and pull information from them. But we're not doing that, but I just want to get that into your mindset that you want to make sure that each of your records is unique so you're not dealing with duplicate, triplicate, or worse records, and then you're like, oh wow, this data is really, really bad. It goes back to that good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out statement I made earlier. All right, so let's get into the fun. Um, you're going to have a link that you will visit for the data set. Um, we will throw that up here in just a moment. But you'll want to download this. But before you download it, let's first look at this and go through this and demonstrate to you what we've done. Okay. We are looking at the spreadsheet. This is the first sheet. The data set that we're working with here is a data set that I established based on the roller coasters that I've rode in my life. I'm up to 43 right now, and I'm planning to add more this summer. But as you can see, I am a roller coaster freak. Let's put it that way. Okay. The view you're seeing is with edit rights on. If you look at this through the link that I provided, you won't have those edit rights. You'll need to download the data set, which you can do by clicking on File and then Download. Okay. So, um, if you click on Edit, okay, let's first jump into this. So this is a data set that I created through direct entry. Okay, sorry about that. Click on Edit, and go to Change Columns. Here is a list of all the columns within this spreadsheet, and over here you can see for coaster name it says text. This tells you that this is a text field, as you can see here in the type. We have no format on it, and we are not validating the entry. Here's date opened. This is a date time field. Again, we're not validating the entry. Primary restraint type, though, is a text field, and we did say validate the entry, and you can see here that we created a list of drop-down menu items. So if we know that there's predetermined values that we want for a data set, we can do that. So you have lap bar, comma, shoulder. This tells us that there's two options. You can also move the order of the columns around. You could accomplish this by the up and down arrows here. You can add new columns or remove existing columns. Note that if you remove a column and it was used in a chart that we're going to look at later, that chart will become invalid because the data upon which it was built is no longer present. So let's explore some pre-made charts that graphically show our data, and then we will end with creating our own charts. So one of the cool features with Google Fusion Tables is this item called geocoding. And geocoding is one of those things that is called putting, this on steroids. So if we look back at our data set here, you can see the amusement park address is Cedar Point. Well, you're going to say, hey, that's not an address, Bob. Well, it is an address because we have geocoded it. So if you click on one of the entries, so we're just going to click on Blue Streak here and go to Edit Geocode. Using Google Maps, I typed in Cedar Point, and it knew the location of Cedar Point based on its data, and I said, yep, that's the right location, done. And I hit save. So then it located it over here. So you can see that here I have coasters in Cedar Point, a coaster up here in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. I have coasters at Knoebels Amusement Park in Ellsburg, Pennsylvania, Dorney Park in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Um, excuse me here. We also have parks in uh, Orange County, California, Knott's Berry Farms, which is a Cedar Fair park, along with Cedar Point, and up here in Northern California in San Jose at California's Great America. And all of this was generated based on the one column of amusement park address. As you can see here, the location is amusement park address. And the red dots that you see there represent the amusement park. And if you were to zoom in closer, you would see individual red dots for each of the coasters. So going back to how we used this at my previous job, ours was within a 50-mile radius, and when we zoomed in, we saw more dots spread out because we had kids in different locations and we were using, like 150 addresses. So let's go on to the next chart, which is a simple chart, excuse me, that shows the percentage of coasters that I've rode that are wood or steel. So we can see here that of my 43 coasters that I've rode, 83.7% are steel and 16.3% are wood. This equates out to 36 steel coasters, 7 wood coasters. And this is a great point to start a discussion question amongst you. And I just want you to think about this yourself, write down the answer, and you can come back to it later. Why would I have rode more steel coasters than wood coasters? So let's move on. We'll talk about this configuration stuff later on. Actually, we're taking this one out. Okay, so here is a breakdown of the manufacturers of each coaster that I've rode. As you can see here, there's multiple slices. The top 3 coaster manufacturers that I've rode are Aerodynamics, B&M, that stands for Bollinger and Malbrid, and I always screw that up, so we're just going to abbreviate it as B&M. And the last one is Intamin AG. So, for the uninformed, those are 3 big names in the roller coaster community in terms of contributing to the roller coaster landscape. Um, According to the roller coaster database website, which is where I gained a lot of this granular information, like the design, the type, the operation, the date open, the lap bar, or the primary restraint type, all that stuff I gained from there. Aerodynamics has 101 roller coasters to their credit. B&M has 92 roller coasters to their credit, and Intamin AG has 121 roller coasters. I will be the first to admit there are companies who are also big names in the roller coaster community that have yet to ride. So I guess as my homework, it will be more coaster riding at new places. Tough job, I know. So this next chart shows a breakdown of my roller coasters at each of the parks I've visited, to which I've been to let me try that again. I have been to 6 parks, okay? No surprise, Cedar Point has 41.9% of my coasters. Um, this makes sense for me since I grew up 121 miles from the park, and I've been a season ticket holder for 9 years now. So, knowing that Cedar Point has 41.9% of my total coasters, you can now start to build responses to my previous question of why would I have rode more steel coasters versus wood coasters. So let's look at the roller coaster offerings for Cedar Point. We come over here to our filter. Um, the filter will let you break things down based on different options. So we're going to break it down based on the park, and then we are going to see that Cedar Point only has 2 wood coasters while the others are steel. So, knowing that, um, excuse me, another way you can also look at it is looking at the manufacturers of the roller coasters at Cedar Point. You'll see that Aerodynamics has 5 coasters at Cedar Point, B&M has 3, and NM and AG has 6. Cedar Point is part of the Cedar Fair company. So maybe one of the charts that you build that I haven't built yet could look at how many coasters, um, the top 3 companies in my data set has coasters at all the Cedar Fair parks. I think the results will surprise you. And this will also show and answer some other questions about, why do these bigger parks tend to go with the same designers and all that. And as you can tell, I'm probably losing more of my voice as we go on. The next chart is just a bar graph representation of the previous parks, or the previous chart rather. And I did this just to demonstrate to you the different ways to visually represent the data. Personally, I like looking at, actually it's not the same, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, it is. This cold is like beating me to death here. Um, so you can see, it's just a visual representation change. Okay, so this next chart is one of my favorites, and it's one that would really get the discussion flowing in a classroom. Average track length. Okay, you can see that the wood coasters I've rode have an average track length of 3,662.14 feet of track length, while the steel coasters have an average of 2,561.01 feet. Why do wood coasters have 1,101.13 feet more than steel coasters? Hold on to this question because we have more questions in the last chart and then we can start to build upon this. So this last chart looks at the height, min, and max of the coasters I've rode in. You can see that the max height for a steel coaster that I've rode is 420 feet. This is Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. While the max height for a wood coaster is 161 feet. And this is Mean Streak at Cedar Point. There's a height difference of 259 feet. Did you know that the second and third hills on Millennium Forest at Cedar Point are taller than some of the tallest points of other roller coasters at Cedar Point? So let's review. The wood coasters I've rode have 1,101.13 feet more track length than the steel coasters, but the steel coasters can go higher than the wood coasters. Interesting data, right? So, what ideas or explanations can you draw from this? I would argue that Cedar Point, which is responsible for 41.9% of my coasters, unfairly influences the numbers in the data set against the rest of the parks. When the name Cedar Point is mentioned, what's the first thing that comes to your mind about Cedar Point? Roller coasters. When Cedar Point builds coasters, they have looked in the past at setting records or being the first to do something. Magnum XL 200 was the first coaster in the world to break the 200-foot barrier. Millennium Force was the first coaster to break the 300-foot barrier, and Top Thrill Dragster was the first to break the 400-foot barrier. I could go on with more Cedar Point facts, but I won't bore you to death. We could also look at the cost of a steel coaster versus a wood coaster, and the cost of a steel coaster is much higher because the price of steel is higher. Gatekeeper is the newest coaster at Cedar Point, debuted in 2013. It has a track length of 4,164 feet and cost $25 million to build. Outlaw Run, which is a wood coaster at Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri, opened in 2013 with a track length of 2,937 feet and cost only $10 million. So, knowing this, I could say that steel coasters that draw crowds and generate revenue beyond that of the roller coaster enthusiast community um, are costly. Uh, Could this cost be a barrier of entry into a market for smaller amusement parks such as Knoebels in Ellisburg, Pennsylvania? Um, Knoebels has 5 coasters currently. There is debate amongst the coaster enthusiasts faithful if Black Diamond should or should not count as a roller coaster, but we will leave that for another day and another discussion. But their bigger coasters at Knoebels are wood coasters, whereas their steel coasters are smaller. So, knowing that Knoebels is a family owned park and that Cedar Point has the backing of the Cedar Fair Corporation, which is the parent company, and knowing that when Cedar Point installs a $25 million attraction, they see a bump in attendance, which results in a bump in park spending and souvenir sales and all that that's related. They can recoup their investment a lot faster than Knoebels, who is who is known as a family park, and you know they're not putting out a new big attraction every other year. So in a more advanced video, after I learn the product more and everything, I want to look at working with multiple data sets to gain more granular information about a park or a coaster manufacturer. Going back to what I said earlier, if you looked at all the Cedar Fair parks, you would probably see a trend amongst them with 3 or 4 roller coaster manufacturers being highly present in all their parks. And then you could dig in and ask those questions about why is that. So here's a quick overview of how I created that wood versus steel coaster count chart. And we're going to go step by step. First thing you want to do is click on this white plus sign in the red box. Click on Add Chart. And this did this earlier, so let me close this out and come back into it. We're going to go to docs.google.com. We're going to open up the document here. And we're going to add a chart. Okay, so we're going to add the chart. Come down here to pie chart. Your category, you need to set as type. You want to summarize the data. And you want a count of the type. Sort by count, and here you go. Now, what I'd like to do is hit reverse because I would like the bigger representation number there, the steel, to be the bigger portion of the pie versus the smaller portion and show it this way. And you're done. So in less than 2 minutes, you created a chart that has data, and you could go and build from there. So how can you use this in the classroom? You can use this in the classroom by creating your own predetermined charts and graphs and holding these discussions with your students. But let's take it one step further. Let's put the power of creation into the hands of the students and allow the students to do what we did here and to lead those discussions. You be the guide and create those starting points for discussions, but see if they can start to connect those dots like we did in this presentation. And our final summarization from this data set is that the off season is a long time period, and it leads normally sane people like myself to create Google Fusion tables with the roller coaster data sets to prompt discussions about roller coasters. Yes, I cannot wait for April 18th in Kings Island to open. I am counting the days. If you have any questions, you can reach me at bob.green@nerdbob.com. That's bob.green at neergbob.com. The website is just Bob Green spelled backwards. Thank you.